The cracked phone screen caught the light as she entered the ballroom. Whispers followed her path across the marble floor. They saw only what they wanted to see, a nobody who didn't belong. They couldn't have been more wrong. Tonight, São Paulo's elite would learn that true power rarely announces itself. It simply waits for the perfect moment to be revealed. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. Leticia Monteiro adjusted the silk strap of her modest black dress as she slipped through the entrance of Edificio Copan's exclusive rooftop venue. The annual Fundação Diamante Gala swirled around her, a kaleidoscope of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the space, while string musicians played in the corner, their notes floating above the hum of privileged conversation. She tucked a strand of her simple, unstyled hair behind her ear. Unlike the other women with their elaborate updos and diamond accessories, Leticia wore no jewelry except a thin silver chain with a small pendant, her mother's wedding. Ring suspended at its center, a waiter offered champagne. She smiled and took a glass, her movements quiet and economical. Nothing about her demanded attention, nothing except, perhaps, the jarring incongruity of her presence among São Paulo's most illustrious. Everyone who matters is here tonight. She overheard a woman say nearby, voice thick with self-importance. Leticia allowed herself a private smile. She slipped her old phone from her modest clutch to check the time. The screen fractured like a spider's web across its surface. Eduardo Santos, the Gala's host and CEO of Brazil's fastest-growing tech company, approached the microphone. His custom-tailored suit probably cost more than what many Brazilians earned in 6 months. "Welcome to the 15th annual Fundação Diamante Gala," he announced. "Tonight, we celebrate excellence while raising funds for those less fortunate." Leticia sipped her champagne, watching from the periphery. She hadn't come for recognition. She hadn't come to be seen at all. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut through Leticia's thoughts as she admired the elaborate flower arrangements. She'd spent hours working with the florist to achieve the perfect balance of native Brazilian blooms and classic roses. A woman in her 40s with a surgically enhanced face stood before her, clipboard in hand, the volunteer badge hanging around. Her neck identified her as Cristina Alves, events coordinator. "This section is reserved for major donors," Cristina said, eyebrows raised. "The general attendance area is through those doors." She gestured toward the less opulent side room where staff and lesser invitees mingled. "I was just admiring the flowers," Leticia explained softly. Christina's eyes flicked to Leticia's outdated phone as she slipped it back into her clutch. "The florist did a wonderful job, didn't she? But I must insist, this area is for VIPs only." "Of course." Leticia nodded and turned away, feeling the woman's dismissive gaze follow her. She'd grown accustomed to such treatment over the years, had even come to expect it. Near the champagne bar, 2 young women in designer dresses nudged each other as Leticia passed. Their voices, deliberately loud enough to be overheard, carried across the marble floor. "Did you see her phone? It looks like something my grandmother would use." "God, I know. And that dress? Definitely off the rack from at least 3 seasons ago." Leticia kept walking, her face betraying nothing. "They don't know any better." Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. She found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone again, checking for messages from her foundation director. The screen's cracks caught the light, fragmenting it into tiny rainbows. "Could everyone please take their seats for dinner?" Eduardo's amplified voice directed the crowd toward elegantly set tables. Leticia found her assigned seat at table 19, far from the central tables where celebrities, politicians, and recognized philanthropists sat. She settled into her chair as others joined her table, their expressions briefly registering surprise at finding themselves seated with someone so plainly dressed. A man in his 50s extended his hand. "Victor Mendes, Mendes Capital." "Leticia Monteiro," she replied simply. "Monteiro?" He frowned slightly. "I don't believe I'm familiar with—" "It's a common name," she offered with a gentle smile. A young man sat down across from her. Marco Almeida. She recognized him immediately. His tech startup had been making headlines for its innovative approach to sustainable energy. His eyes lingered briefly on her simple appearance before dismissing her entirely. "So, Victor," Marco said, deliberately turning away from Leticia, "I heard your firm might be looking for new investment opportunities." The conversation swirled around her, excluding her without explicit effort. It wasn't malicious, simply the natural flow of power recognizing power, or what they perceived as power. When the first course arrived, Marco glanced at Leticia's phone beside her plate and smirked. "Is that a family heirloom?" he asked, nodding toward it. Leticia met his gaze. "Something like that. You know, my company has just released a new model that's quite affordable, even for—" He paused, eyes flicking to her modest dress. "Those on a budget." Several people at the table chuckled. "Thank you," Leticia said evenly, "but I prefer to keep this one." Marco shrugged. "Suit yourself, though you might find it difficult to network effectively in this crowd with such outdated technology." She took a sip of water. Perhaps. The slight flush of embarrassment that crept up her neck was real, not because of her phone, but because of the pettiness disguised as concern. Her parents had taught her better than to find worth in objects. By the time dessert was served, the gala had entered its second phase, the auction and major donation announcements. Leticia watched as Eduardo returned to the stage, this time accompanied by the hospital director, who would benefit from tonight's fundraising. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to announce that we've already surpassed last year's total," Eduardo beamed. "We've raised 15 million reais for pediatric cancer research." Applause rippled through the ballroom. "And now a special tradition of our gala, acknowledging our most generous supporters." Names were called, wealthy families and corporate entities recognized for their contributions. 5 million from the Ferreira Group, 3 million from Global Industries. Each announcement met with polite applause. Marco leaned across the table. "No point in staying for this part," he said to Victor. "These are all the usual contributors. Nothing surprising." As they continued down the list, Leticia felt her heart rate increase slightly. Not from anxiety, but from the anticipation of the lesson that was about to unfold. Eduardo's voice suddenly shifted to a more intrigued tone. "And now for our final announcement of the evening. This year, we received an unprecedented anonymous donation that will transform what's possible for our pediatric oncology department." The room quieted. This donor initially requested complete anonymity, but has graciously agreed to be recognized tonight. Eduardo paused dramatically. "A contribution of 50 million reais, the largest single donation in our foundation's history." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. This remarkable generosity comes from the Aurora Project, directed by a visionary who believes in changing how we approach childhood cancer treatment in Brazil. Leticia took a deep breath. This wasn't about ego or recognition. This was about purpose. "Please join me in welcoming to the stage Leticia Monteiro." The silence that followed was deafening. At her table, heads swiveled toward her in disbelief. Marco's mouth literally hung open. Victor blinked rapidly, reassessing everything he thought he knew. Leticia rose smoothly from her chair, her simple black dress suddenly seeming like a deliberate choice rather than a limitation. As she walked toward the stage, she felt hundreds of eyes tracking her movement, reassessing, recalculating her worth. Christina, the volunteer who had dismissed her earlier, stared in shocked recognition from the sidelines. Eduardo extended his hand as Leticia climbed the steps to the stage. "Miss Monteiro, we are beyond grateful for your extraordinary generosity." She approached the microphone, her voice calm and clear. "Thank you, Eduardo. The work being done at Hospital das Crianças deserves support, and I'm honored to contribute." She turned to address the room. "Many of you are wondering who I am. The truth is simple. I'm the daughter of João and Maria Monteiro." Recognition dawned on the older faces in the crowd. The Monteiro shipping empire had been legendary before it diversified into technology and sustainable agriculture decades ago. When my parents died 5 years ago, I inherited not just their fortune, but their values. They taught me that wealth isn't what you display. It's what you deploy. She looked directly at her table, at Marco's still stunned expression. "My phone has a cracked screen because it was my mother's last phone. She took her final pictures on it. Some things can't be upgraded or replaced. Her voice remained steady. And some things, like children fighting for their lives, shouldn't. Wait while we worry about appearances. The silence in the room was complete now. Not the silence of disinterest, but of rapt attention. The Aurora Project is funding 3 new treatment facilities across Brazil, focusing on communities with limited access to specialized care. But buildings mean nothing without skilled people to staff them and research to improve outcomes. She gestured to the hospital director. Tonight's donation will establish Brazil's first pediatric oncology research center dedicated to developing treatments specifically for our population's genetic profile. The applause began slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet not because of her wealth, but because of her vision. As Leticia returned to her table, the atmosphere had transformed entirely. The same people who had dismissed her now angled for her attention. Marco stood awkwardly, his earlier condescension replaced with obvious embarrassment. "Ms. Montero, I had no idea," he began. "Few people do," she replied simply. "That's by design." Victor leaned forward. "The Montero family. I remember when your father revolutionized shipping logistics in the 90s. We all thought the company had been sold off after their accident." "The holdings were restructured," Leticia explained. "But the core assets remain intact, just more privately managed now." Marco couldn't seem to stop staring at her phone. "But why would you use this phone?" She picked it up, running her thumb across the fractured screen. "Because every time I look at it, I remember what matters. Not the device, but the memories it holds. Not how things appear, but what they mean." The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of new introductions and sudden interest. Those who had whispered about her now sought to be photographed with her. The young influencers who had mocked her earlier hovered nearby, clearly hoping for an opportunity to reintroduce themselves. Christina approached with a distinctly different demeanor. "Ms. Montero, if I had known—" "It's fine," Leticia interrupted gently. "You were doing your job. Still, I apologize for my rudeness earlier." Leticia nodded acceptance, then excused herself. She needed air. On the rooftop garden, away from the crowd, Leticia gazed out at São Paulo's endless lights. The city sprawled before her like a galaxy of earthbound stars. "It's quite a view, isn't it?" She turned to find an older woman standing nearby, distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to hold wisdom rather than judgment. "Dr. Helena Cardoso," the woman introduced herself. "I run the oncology department that will benefit from your generosity." "It's an honor to meet you," Leticia said sincerely. "Your research on treatment protocols for childhood leukemia is revolutionary." Helena looked surprised. "You've read my work?" "Every paper. My foundation doesn't invest blindly." The doctor nodded appreciatively. "Most donors want their names on buildings. Few understand the unsexy reality of medical research, the failures, the incremental progress." "My mother died of cancer," Leticia said quietly. "I watched her deteriorate while doctors tried protocols designed for European genetics on her Brazilian body. We need better options for our people." Helena's eyes fell to the phone in Leticia's hand. "I recognized it immediately. That model was discontinued years ago. My son saved for months to buy one before he—" She paused. "Before leukemia took him." Understanding passed between them, a connection deeper than wealth or status could ever forge. "I've had everything money can buy," Leticia said, her voice finally revealing emotion, "except more time with her." They stood in companionable silence, two women who understood that some losses couldn't be measured in reais or remedied with donations. "You could have announced your donation in advance," Helena observed. "Been seated at the head table, received the full VIP treatment." Leticia's lips curved slightly. "And missed discovering who people really are. How they treat someone they believe. Has no value to them?" She shook her head. "My father always said you learn more from watching people who think you can't help them than from those who know you can." Helena laughed softly. "A wise man. Will you continue to maintain this selective anonymity for as long as it serves my purpose?" "And what purpose is that?" Leticia turned back to the cityscape. to separate those who care about appearances from those who care about impact. The following morning, Leticia sat in her understated apartment, scrolling through news coverage of the gala. Several articles mentioned the mysterious heiress who had stunned São Paulo society. Her assistant, Miguel, one of the few people who knew her true financial status, brought her coffee. "Your phone has been ringing non-stop," he reported. "Investment opportunities, interview requests, charity boards wanting your participation." "And social invitations?" Leticia asked with knowing amusement. "Those especially, including from Marco Almeida, who has called 3 times. She set down her cracked phone. "Any messages from Dr. Cardoso?" "Yes, she sent the research proposals you requested, and she mentioned something called Project Legacy." Leticia nodded. "That's the one I'm most interested in. It would establish tissue banking from pediatric cancer patients to study Brazilian-specific genetic markers." "Will you take any of these meetings?" Miguel asked, gesturing to the list of callers. She considered this carefully. "Arrange meetings with anyone focused on the work. Decline purely social invitations. Even from the mayor, especially from the mayor." She smiled. "He had plenty of opportunities to support the children's hospital before knowing who I was." As Miguel left, Leticia opened her laptop to review the Aurora project's next initiatives. The revelation of her identity would complicate things, but perhaps it could also be leveraged. Her phone buzzed with a text from Helena. "When you're ready to see what your money is building, come visit our labs. No gala dress required." Leticia smiled. 6 months later, Leticia walked through the newly renovated research wing at Hospital das Crianças. Dr. Cardoso led her past laboratories where scientists worked diligently on the mysteries of pediatric cancer. "Your funding has already changed what's possible," Helena explained. "We've hired 3 researchers who would have gone abroad for opportunities, and we've started sequencing work that will help us understand why certain treatments fail with our population." They paused at a wall displaying photographs of children, some smiling in recovery, others memorialized in loving portraits. "I want to show you something special," Helena said, leading her to a room at the end of the corridor. As they entered, Leticia saw a circular space with comfortable seating and tablets mounted at each station. "This is our Family Knowledge Center," Helena explained, "where parents and children can learn about treatments in accessible language, connect with support groups, and track their own medical information." "It's wonderful," Leticia said, genuinely moved. "Look at the name." Above the entrance, a simple plaque read, "The Maria Monteiro Family Center, where knowledge brings comfort." Leticia's breath caught. "You didn't have to—" "It wasn't my decision," Helena interrupted gently. "The hospital board insisted, not because of your donation's size, but because of the story behind it." Later that evening, as they shared coffee in Helena's office, the doctor asked, "Have you replaced your phone yet?" Leticia pulled out the device, still cracked, still outdated. "No, but I've changed how I think about it." "Oh?" "At first, I kept it as a connection to my mother. Then it became a test to see who would judge me for appearances. Now," she turned it over in her hand, "now it's a reminder that broken things can still serve important purposes." Helena nodded thoughtfully. "You know, you've started something of a movement. I've noticed several young volunteers deliberately using older phones. When I asked one about it, she said, 'It's the Monteiro philosophy, value over appearance.'" Leticia laughed. "That wasn't my intention. The best legacies rarely are." 1 year after her revelation at the gala, Leticia found herself back at the same venue. This time she was welcomed at the entrance, escorted to the VIP section, offered champagne before she could ask. The difference was striking, yet somewhat hollow. The attention felt performative, the exact superficiality she'd always avoided. Eduardo approached immediately. "Leticia, we've saved you a seat at the head table." "Thank you, but I'd prefer something less conspicuous." He looked confused. "But, as our honorary chair, I accepted that role to advance the cause, not for special treatment," she reminded him gently. As Eduardo reluctantly showed her to a less prominent table, Leticia noticed a young woman entering the ballroom. She wore a simple blue dress, tasteful but far from designer. Her makeup was minimal, her only jewelry, a vintage brooch. Most tellingly, she clutched an older model phone with visible wear. The girl hesitated at the entrance, clearly uncomfortable as glances and whispers followed her. Something in her determined expression reminded Leticia of herself. Without hesitation, Leticia crossed the room and extended her hand to the newcomer. "I'm Leticia Montero." "Ana Silva," the young woman replied, nervous but steady. "I'm representing the Favela Technology Initiative tonight." "Walk with me, Ana," Leticia offered her arm. "Tell me about your work." As they moved through the crowd, Leticia could feel the eyes following them, some curious, some calculating. "People are staring," Ana whispered. "Let them," Leticia replied. "They're seeing the future." "What do you mean?" Leticia smiled. "A future where worth isn't determined by appearances, where innovation comes from unexpected places, where a girl from a favela and a woman with a cracked phone can redefine what power looks like." Ana's posture straightened almost imperceptibly. "My father told me about you, about last year's gala." "And what did he say?" "That you reminded him of a saying his grandmother used, 'True gold doesn't fear the fire of testing.'" As they reached Leticia's table, Marco Almeida approached, his manner entirely different from the previous year. "Leticia, wonderful to see you again." His smile was broad, but his eyes immediately flicked to Ana with obvious confusion. "Marco, meet Ana Silva. She's developed a mesh network system that provides internet access throughout Paraisópolis using reclaimed electronics." His expression shifted from dismissal to professional interest. "That's actually quite innovative. My company has been exploring similar technologies." "Then you should definitely talk," Leticia said, knowing exactly what she was doing. "Ana's prototype has outperformed several commercial solutions at 1/10 the cost." She watched as Marco's entrepreneurial instincts overcame his social prejudices. Within minutes, he was engaged in earnest conversation with Ana about technical specifications and scalability. Across the room, Leticia caught Dr. Cardoso's eye. The older woman raised her glass in a subtle toast. Later that evening, as the donation announcements began, Leticia experienced the gala from the other side, as someone whose contribution was known in advance, whose presence was anticipated, rather than overlooked. The Aurora project continues its transformative partnership with a donation of 60 million reais, Eduardo announced. Applause erupted automatically, but Leticia found herself watching Ana instead. The young woman's project received a much smaller recognition, just 2 million reais from a tech incubator, but her face showed more genuine joy than many of the wealthy donors who gave out of obligation or tax strategy. As the evening concluded, Leticia found Ana again. "How was your first gala?" Ana smiled. "Educational. I've never been in a room with so many people who first dismissed me, then suddenly found me fascinating." "And how did that feel?" "Confusing, validating, a little sad." Ana hesitated. "Is it always like this?" Leticia considered the question carefully. "It can be unless you decide it won't be." "What do you mean?" "You get to choose which validation matters." Leticia touched her own cracked phone screen. "For some people, worth is determined by appearances, affiliations, addresses. But for others, the ones who actually change things, worth comes from impact, like you," Ana said. Leticia shook her head. "I was born into privilege. My choice was simply how to use it. Your journey is far more impressive." They had reached the exit. Outside, São Paulo's lights stretched into the distance. "What will you do now?" Leticia asked. "Take Marco's offer to scale our technology, but stay based in Paraisópolis." Ana's voice was firm. "The solutions have to come from within the community, not imposed from outside." Leticia smiled. "If you ever need an investor who understands that philosophy, call me." She handed Ana a business card, simple, unadorned, with just a phone number. "I will." Ana paused. "You know, I kept my old phone because I couldn't afford a new one. But now, even when I can, you might keep it anyway? As a reminder of where I started." Leticia nodded. "The most powerful reminders are often the simplest." 2 weeks after the gala, Leticia made a decision. She carefully removed her mother's phone from its case and placed it in a small, elegant shadow box. Below it, she added a simple inscription: "Appearances deceive, purpose endures." She hung it in the lobby of the Aurora Project's headquarters, not as a trophy but as a compass. Her assistant raised an eyebrow when he saw it. "Does this mean you're finally upgrading your phone?" in a manner of speaking. She showed him her new device, not the latest model, not the most expensive, but thoughtfully chosen. "This one's battery lasts 3 days and can be repaired rather than replaced. The company has ethical manufacturing practices, not what people might expect from one of Brazil's wealthiest women," he observed. "Exactly the point." Leticia smiled. "Value isn't in what people expect, it's in what truly matters." That afternoon, she received a message from Ana with photos of the Favela Technology Initiative's first major installation. The images showed children connecting to educational resources, small business owners accessing markets, medical professionals conducting remote consultations. The final photo showed Ana standing proudly with her team, all local residents or previously overlooked talent. She held her old phone up like a badge of honor. The caption read, "Some things don't need to be new to change the world." Leticia saved the image, feeling a circle complete itself. From her mother's legacy to a new generation finding their power, the true message had never been about technology or wealth at all. It had always been about seeing beyond the surface. We walk through life assigning value based on packaging, judging books by covers, people by appearances, worth by price tags. But true value rarely announces itself. It whispers from unexpected corners, speaks through cracked screens, emerges from overlooked places. The most powerful question we can ask isn't, "What does this appear to be?" but rather, "What purpose does it serve?" In a world obsessed with image, the revolutionary act is to seek substance. The most valuable things in life rarely shine the brightest. They simply endure the longest.